I discovered 3 terrifying true horror stories from a beach house that will chill you to the bone. I never should have opened that door. They said the beach house was just an old, abandoned place, but it felt wrong from the moment I set foot in the yard. The air was thick, heavy with secrets. Shadows danced in the crevices, whispering tales of those who come before. The smell? A mix of damp wood and saltwater, but also something else, something rotten. The locals told stories of eerie lights flickering at night, voices echoing across the waves. I'd brush it off, thinking they were just legends spun by sea-salted tongues. But standing there, I felt dread creep like a cold chill under my skin. Who could resist a mystery? As I wandered through the house, I felt a tingle at the back of my neck. The silence was oppressive, so thick it felt like gravity wanted to keep me down. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. Moths flitted against the light, their frantic wings a stark contrast to the stillness around me. It was too quiet, almost expectant. Suddenly, a sound sliced through the tension, a scrape, like nails against wood. My heart raced. The noise echoed in the stillness, echoing off the walls like a cruel taunt. I inched closer to the source, a closed door at the end of a hallway. It felt like time stopped. The air turned icy. Had it been ajar before, with a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob. The metal felt cold, almost alive. My breath quickened as the handle clicked under my grip. There was a familiar scent creeping out from behind it, the unmistakable stench of decay. I hesitated, but my curiosity tethered me there. When I finally swung the door open, darkness swallowed me whole. The flashlight flickered. Shadows swirled. A figure stood just beyond the light's reach, eyes glinting like shards of glass. Was it my mind playing tricks or something far worse? As the door creaked further, a shudder snaked down my spine. The figure was moving. Panic seized me. My legs felt like lead. I stumbled back, the door slamming shut behind me, trapping me with whatever lurked within. My heart thundered in my chest, each beat a desperate call for escape. But escape wasn't an option anymore. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness pulsed with a life of its own, the air thickening into a concoction of suspense and dread. My heart raced as I pressed my back against the door, icy sweat dripping down my spine. The silence that followed was a predator stalking its prey, and I was utterly vulnerable. It felt as though the very house had exhaled, holding its breath in anticipation of what might come next. What was that figure? Why did it feel so familiar? In the blink of an eye, memories flooded back, a translucent mist of faces and voices, friends who were supposed to be with me for a beach weekend that never came, whispers of laughter that faded into silence. Had something drawn me to this cursed place, a lure I couldn't resist? The flashlight flickered once more before dying, leaving me alone in the oppressive black. I groped in the dark, my fingers grazing over the rough, splintered walls. Shadows shifted and twisted, taunting me as though they held secrets I wasn't ready to discover. I felt my way along the doorframe, praying it would open. I yanked the knob, but it wouldn't budge. From deep within the house, the faint sound of whispering broke through the stillness. It swirled around me, clawing at my sanity. Help us. Stay with us. Ghostly pleas echoed, familiar yet haunting, drowning me in their chilling embrace. The air grew heavier, pressing down on me, pulling me toward the darkness. Who's there? My voice trembled, sounding childish, desperate against the otherworldly cries. The whispers ceased abruptly, replaced by a low, sinister laugh that rattled through the bowels of the floorboards, echoing up to me like a taunt. There was no mistaking its echo. It was a disembodied sound that drew me in, wheedled its way directly into my mind. I felt a prickle at my neck again, urging me to turn, to face the darkness. Whatever fear gripped me was nothing compared to the magnetic pull of that laugh. I pivoted slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The figure stood not far from me now, the faintest outline shifting like smoke. My breath caught in my throat as I grasped the reality of what my curiosity had banished me to, a tide pulling me towards the abyss, and then the figure spoke, its voice wrapping around me like chill mist. "You invited us here. Don't you remember?" My blood ran cold like ice water in my veins. The truth hit me like a brick. Those were the voices of my friends. I remembered their laughter, how vibrant it used to be. But now, it twisted grotesquely, transformed into unsettling echoes of longing and loss, beckoning me into a realm where they were no longer alive. I stumbled back as the figure moved closer, revealing a silhouette I recognized amidst the dark. A face? No, it was a play of shadow, a trick of the light. But in its depths, glimmers of familiarity wrapped around me like barbed wire, dragging me deeper into horror. I felt myself grip the door handle again, trapped in an eternal fight between flight and the deathly allure of the shadows. Timid footsteps echoed behind me, raw and breathing as if the house itself had come alive, closing in like a vice. This time, a heavy pressure bore down my shoulders, forcing me deeper. A voice chimed out above the din, sweet and treacherous, "We've missed you. Come play with us forever." As the pressure grew, that familiar laugh pierced the silence again, but this time it was joined by others' whispers turning into a cacophony of pleading and joyous cries. They surged toward me, arms of shadow reaching out, coaxing me toward an unfathomable fate. Then, in an unforeseen moment of clarity, I grasped something glinting beneath my foot, a shard of glass, substantial and sharp. I lunged forward, swinging it blindly in the direction of those harrowing voices, and suddenly, the laughter stopped. It was replaced by a ghastly silence that descended like a heavy fog, weighty and oppressive, filling the very marrow of my bones. I turned to the door one last time, heart racing, and pulled it open with all my might. But what lay beyond made me scream, for the hallway was filled with radiant figures bathing in moonlight, illuminating their grotesque grins that twisted and stretched, their faces morphing into horrific shapes of my friends, eyes hollow and endless. "Welcome back!" they shrieked in unison, their once gentle voices now a chorus of dread. The front door creaked wider, and beyond it, the beach loomed dark and tempestuous. Without a second thought, I stumbled out, but as I crossed the threshold, a hand reached out and locked tight around my ankle, pulling me back. That my scream echoed across the beach, swallowed by the waves that drew closer with each breath, while the laughter intensified, its ecstasy a harrowing promise of eternity. A single thought enveloped me in that moment of sheer panic: who would answer the door next? The tide crashed against the shore with a vengeance, a feral greeting that echoed the chaos within me. As I was yanked backward, my heart thundered against my ribs, urging me to fight with everything I had. The sandy ground beneath my feet turned to a treacherous grasping maw, pulling me back into the clutches of that cursed place as if it yearned for my very soul. I kicked fiercely, my foot making contact with something solid, and I wrenched myself free, but it was not without consequence. As I staggered onto the beach, I could feel an icy grip slipping away, retreating into darkness. And that darkness clung to me, a phantom presence that whispered promises of what I would leave behind. The twisted laughter of my friends, now warped into something more sinister and wicked. That I turned, half expecting to see them standing at the threshold, their faces marred by shadow, straining to pull me back to them. Instead, a chilling emptiness greeted me. The house loomed, grotesque and silent, its windows dark hollows throbbing with malevolence, watching as I struggled to catch my breath. Yet, even the beach felt wrong. The saltwater breeze carried with it a sickly sweetness, mingled with an overwhelming sense of despair. The distant sound of waves faded, replaced by a soft but unmistakable rhythm, like a heartbeat emanating from the earth itself. I should have run, but a morbid curiosity rooted me to the sandy ground. Drawn by an invisible thread, I stepped closer to the water's edge where the moonlight danced upon its surface, tremors of silver mimicking the pulsing of my own racing heart, and that heartbeat became a chant, low and incantatory, an echo of longing from the depths of the ocean. Join us, it moaned, intertwined with the roar of crashing waves, the melody wrapping around me like cold tendrils of fog. I turned my back on the house and waded into the water, heart racing with dread and disbelief. What was happening? My friends, were they really lost here? The water was freezing, but I felt a warmth bloom deep within me, a sense of belonging tainted by anxiety. With every step, my pulse synchronized with the deep thrum of the world around me, an ancient rhythm beckoning me toward the depths. Suddenly, a shock of movement caught my peripheral vision, and I glanced back. From the black abyss of night, beams of light flared, fragile yet glowing, illuminating the figures of my friends. They stood at the water's edge, their forms tantalizingly familiar, smiles stretching unnaturally, laughter echoing like shards of glass as they mirrored my movements, dancing on the edge of the waves. "Come back to us," they chorused, words flowing like oil on water. The sickening sweetness filled the space between us, suffocating and intoxicating. "It's wonderful here, don't you remember?" "No. You're not real," I screamed, as the encroaching tide licked at my ankles, urging me further into its depths. Yet the truth clawed at the back of my mind, that flicker of recognition, something shared between us, something that transcended the physical realm. I struggled, the sound of my heartbeat drowning in the resonance of theirs. As the water engulfed me up to my thighs, I felt it, a tugging, a rippling sensation like fingers caressing my skin. It wasn't just water that held me captive, it was the relentless curse that weaved through my existence, binding me ever closer to the ones I lost. The air turned thick with a malevolent tenderness, the world around me blurred into shades of abyss as their voices grew stronger, no longer whispers, but a thunderous call echoing in the dark. "Join us. Forever, it will be perfect." But then I remembered the glass shard, the way it had felt in my hand, my final act of defiance. I lunged backward, wrestling with the wretched pull of the ocean, and fumbled through the pockets of my soaked clothing, heart racing. As I tore through the depths of my coat, something cold and sharp met my fingers, a blade, slick with seawater. My breath hitched. With all my might, I swung it toward the closest shadow on the shore, trying to sever that thread binding us, but just as the blade sliced through the air, a sudden chill brushed against my skin. The water stilled, the air thickening with an undeniable dread. For a heartbeat, everything froze, the laughter, the light, the plea, all of it turned to a deafening silence. I glanced up, and time itself seemed to unravel before me. Through the deepening obscurity, the figures of my friends dissolved, shattered like glass into countless pieces, scattering across the foam, their faces morphing into madness, grins stretching impossibly wide as they screamed in utter horror. "What have you done?" The ocean roiled violently, swollen waves crashing against me, a furious beast unleashed. And then, something rose beneath the surface, an enormous shadow, twisted and monstrous, emerging from the depths. It combined the wrath of the sea with the familiar pleas of those I once cherished, crystallizing in an amalgam of fury and despair, heart-stoppingly real. A deep voice rumbled from the depths, an echo that resonated from the abyss. "Now there's no escape." The realization hit me with suffocating force. As I watched those shadowy strands tear apart, dragged into a swirling vortex of despair, my screams were swallowed by an onslaught of darkness that rose to claim me. The tides pulled me once again with unyielding force, and I braced myself against the chaos of the night. In that unraveling moment filled with horror, I wondered, was I simply choosing a fate worse than death? The tempest raged, a cacophony of thunderous waves that echoed my heartbeat, and flurries of wind that shrieked like banshees. I dragged myself from the water's grasp, lungs burning, skin slick and eerily cool, yet the taste of salt mingled with something metallic on my tongue. Panic gripped me. My friends were gone, or had they ever been there? Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to escape the malevolent force that poured forth from the sea. I stumbled back to the beach, the blackened sky seemed to ripple as if alive, and the house remained a malevolent sentinel looming against the backdrop of chaos. Dread coiled in my stomach. I loathed the thought of returning there, but deep within me was a sense of urgency, a need to understand the truth hiding behind the veil of the waves and shadows. Each tentative step toward the house felt like wandering deeper into the mouth of some great beast. Shadows danced along the walls, flitting in and out of the corners of my vision, and I could feel those continuities pulling at my consciousness, the heartbeat, the laughter. It was like echoes taunting me, fake and real in equal measure. Faced with the darkness creeping up the steps, I hesitated, fear pooling in my gut like molten lead. "Come back," a familiar voice hissed from the recesses of the house, fraying the corners of my composure. I froze, the breath caught in my throat. "Anyone?" My words trembled, an involuntary plea against the oppressive silence that responded. There was a pause, then came the sound of shuffling from inside, the low thud of footsteps as if several pairs were approaching slowly, deliberately. The grating of wood against wood, the aroma of wet earth mingling with stale air clawed under my skin, intensifying the suffocating sensation. I forced myself to take a step closer, cringing at the erratic gusts that burst through the door like a breath drawing me inward. What awaited on the other side? I pushed the door open, praying for a glimmer of light, for anything that might confirm the reality of my arrival. Instead, I found myself in a dimly lit passage, walls weeping shadows, the temperature plummeting to an intolerable chill. Fragments of whispers slithered in, punctuated by distorted laughter that sparked memories of my friends, of happier times turned to ash. "Remember the campfire?" A voice floated down the hallway, thick and syrupy as if it formed from the very shadows surrounding me. "The stories we told, the promises made, stop it." I shouted, but no sound emerged, swallowed by the oppressive weight of the atmosphere. My heart thundered as horrid figures flickered in and out of existence before me, glimpses of the familiar with rotting faces, their laughter warped and twisted. Drawing in a trembling breath, I pressed on, determined to reach the back of the house, to face whatever evil seeped from its walls. The floor creaked beneath me, echoing the heavy thuds of my own heartbeat resonating like the pulse of the ocean. At last, I spotted a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, illuminating a sliver of sickly pallor that spilled out. The whispers grew louder, forming shapes in my mind. My friends were here. I stumbled toward the door, desperate for answers, for salvation. But the moment I pushed it open, the whispering pulled me into a sudden calm. Inside, the room was an altar to despair, cluttered with remnants of faded photographs where smiles had turned to grimaces, and the air smelled of decay. At the center stood a significant piece, a mirror, ornate and haunting, reflecting not only my image but also the malevolent energy thrumming around it. I hesitated, drawn to it like a moth to flame. My reflection twisted, showing a warped version of myself, eyes growing dark, a shadow behind my head, and then it shifted to reveal the smiling faces of my friends, not as I remembered but as ghouls twisted in torment. "Help us." Their mouths formed the words in perfect unison, stretching impossibly wide as fragments of glass erupted from the mirror, swirling like a storm. "We're trapped. You have to help us." I staggered back, horror clawing at my insides as a sickening realization dawned upon me. The mirror was their prison, reflecting their souls in excruciating agony. But the whispers became a cacophony, now demanding my attention, begging for release as the shadows slithered closer, extending long, thin fingers from the edges of the glass. Before I could think, I stumbled backward, caught off guard by a spectral force that surged up from the mirror like a geyser, a reflection breaking into the night, threatening to spill forth into the world. The shadows danced around me, the air thickening with despair and madness, and just then, I felt a new presence emerge from the darkness behind the mirror, something more sinister than the cries of my friends. A deep rumble resonated in my chest, echoing a word I couldn't quite catch, pulling my gaze unwillingly back to the mirror. In the reflection, another figure materialized, hunched and grotesque, with eyes burning like embers in a shadowed face. "You shouldn't have come back," it hissed with a voice that echoed with myriad tones, embodying every lost soul who had ever wandered here. It raised its hand, ready to take me, the very essence of the night writhing around me, and those haunting pleas crescendoed into a symphony of horror. "Join us. Forever." The world shattered again, and I braced for the darkness to claim me, but I had one last thought. Was I to become like them, trapped and screaming, another reflection in that vile glass? The answers lay just beyond my grasp, and the mirror quivered, reaching out. Then, as I felt myself being drawn in, I caught a glimpse of my friends. Now grotesque echoes of themselves will be waiting. They screamed, eyes wide and terrified, but what lingers in my mind is a more chilling thought: who would be waiting for me when I joined them? The air crackled with a grotesque energy as shadows surged around the mirror, pulsating like the thrumming heartbeat of some ancient creature poised to consume me whole. I could sense the figure behind me moving, the tension thick enough to slice. The whispers grew rhythmically louder, a chorus of souls trapped in eternal anguish. My heart raced, a desperate drum in a tenuous silence, as I fought the urge to succumb to the abyssal pull of the mirror. "Help us!" echoed around me again, morphing into an anguished wail. I stumbled backward, slipping on the wooden floor, now slick with the essence of dread. The reflection trembled with each breath I took, a horror show reliving itself in the fractured glass. The grotesque figure inside the mirror started banging against it, spurring the glass to ripple, warping the images reflected within its cruel depths. "Stop!" I shouted, though the mere act felt like a futile plea against something far greater than myself. Time trickled as if I were caught in an eddy, the world outside the mirrored surface shattering into a flurry of colors and sounds. My friends, their faces twisted and stricken, melded into a single chilling image. Their mouths moved, but the words shattered on the floor, an unintelligible cacophony that echoed in my ears like the roar of an ocean. Suddenly, the light dimmed, every flicker fought against the overwhelming shadows swallowing the corners of the room. I turned, searching for an escape, but the door stood solidly shut, sealed by a malevolent force that echoed my earlier cries for help. I was alone in this hell. "Join us!" the figure shouted, its voice cutting across the thick, musty air. The shadows surrounding me lashed out, a tempest of despair, grasping for my limbs, tugging with insidious intent. They yearned to pull me into their nightmarish realm. I thrashed, but each move seemed to only bring me closer to the edge of that cursed mirror. "Do not let them take you." A voice broke through the chaos, a glimmer of clarity amidst the darkness. It was my own voice, or a version of me I hadn't yet met. I turned back towards the mirror, the horrific image of my friends now interlaced with strands of darkness reaching out like malignant tendrils. Their faces screamed in abject horror, merging agony with desperation. "Please, do not leave us," they implored, but assured of my senses, I fought against the eerie calm that threatened to wash over me, to devour me whole. I wouldn't become another lost soul echoing within that cursed chamber. Fingers pressed against the glass as I stepped closer, my reflection a tortured visage staring back, digging deeper into the recesses of my fears. "You are one of us," the hissing voice proclaimed, desire spilling from its words as I felt myself being pulled closer, my will wavering against the pressure. Then something shifted, a flicker in the mirror, a sudden realization slashing through the chaos. The mirror was not just a reflection, it was a portal, even more chilling, a mouth open to the endless dark beyond. It yearned for not just souls, but for flesh, for me. It wasn't the friends I longed to save, it was my own existence I had to claim. Panic ignited within me, raw and primal. My corporeal hands struck out against the wall, clawing at the wood beneath. "No! I refuse!" I screamed, clenching my teeth against the onslaught of images warping my mind. With a fierce shake of my head, I framed my own truth, pushing aside the nightmares that lurked in every shadow, but the mirror's whispers became a singular, unrelenting growl, echoing my every thought back at me, twisting it into grotesque syntax. "You are trapped. You are one of us." In that moment of realization, the shadows surged forward, an overwhelming tide. I could feel their cold tendrils wrap around my throat, squeezing, pulling me closer to that dark abyss. My vision blurred, the mirror's smoke-like surface began to swirl, the ghastly figure inside appearing more desperate and threatening, pulses of anger vibrating from its very essence that I saw a flicker of hope, a window into the world outside, just beyond the malevolent force wrapping around me. I breathed in, filling my collapsing lungs with a determination that had been buried deep within the muddied torment. With all the strength I could muster, I dashed past the shadows, crashing into the door with everything my fractured soul had left at it burst open, and as I stumbled out, I felt a force clinging to my ankle, dragging me back, the cries of my friends merging into one earth-shattering scream. "You can't leave us. You can't." Just as my fingertips grazed the cool air beyond the threshold, a flash of light blinded me, disorienting me. In that moment, I knew the pull of the mirror was real, and I had made a choice. But what would the shadows leave behind if I escaped? What would follow me out, stretching across the threshold into the world I thought I could reclaim? As I wheeled around, the whispering insanity reduced to a chilling silence, I caught sight of something creeping out of the corners, an eye gleaming with vile intent lurking in its depths. An echo reverberated through the air, one final, ghastly whisper brushing against my ear, "You'll be back." I staggered away, eyes wide, but the primal dread wrapped around me like a cloak, a reminder that I was never free from what haunted these walls. As I turned to run into the night, the shadows recoiled, but not without a promise. Darkness had a way of chasing you longer and harder than light ever could, and I could almost hear their laughter blending with the wind behind me. And then, as I raced toward the edge of the beach, my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart plunged as I saw the contact, each name on the screen remembered all too well, each face carved into my mind and heart. But beneath their names was something more sinister, a new message, sent only 5 minutes ago. "Come back. We've missed you." The wind howled in protest as I stumbled away from the mirror's grasp, the salty air of the ocean clashing with the pervasive dread that clawed at the edges of my mind. Each step I took away from that cursed place felt weighted, as if I were shrouded in an unseen fog of despair. The crashing waves sounded like the sobs of those trapped souls, mourning their eternal fate, as I strained to ignore the haunting message on my phone. My friends, those names flashing menacingly on the screen in stark reminder of the bonds we once shared, felt like ghosts haunting the edges of my consciousness, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of helplessness. The darkness encroached, slinking ever closer, and each glance back towards the beach house seared a new fear into my heart. Desperately, I dashed toward the nearby cliffs. I needed to distance myself, to gain perspective and breath away from the sinister forces that sought to ensnare me. As I crested the rocky outcropping, I could hear the surf crashing below, waves tumbling into one another, mocking my fleeing sanity. But the phone buzzed again, jarring me from my turbulent thoughts. "Come back," it pleaded. "We miss you." I nearly threw the device against the jagged rocks, but an instinctual fear took hold. What if it was different this time? I couldn't remember the last time I ignored their calls, where I had walked away from the safety of friendships that now felt like a lifeline wrapped around my throat. My fingers trembled against the screen, lingering over a voice call. But something in the recesses of my mind stopped me, a red flag waving defiantly amidst the chaos. What if they had already crossed over? What if they were no longer the friends I once knew, but something far more insidious? The thought raced through my mind, that I might just be reaching into the dark abyss where no light could shine, appending all that I knew and loved. Once that I turned away, the phone's light flickering in somber rejection of my decision. Maybe if I kept running, kept moving, the darkness would fade behind me. But with each beat of my heart, I felt their pull intensify, drawing me back toward the abyss as if I were a moth to its insatiable fire. In the distance, a fog rolled in, thick and oily, creeping over the landscape like a sentient predator, preying upon the weak-minded. I took slow, deliberate breaths, trying to maintain control. I pushed forward, the gravel beneath my feet crunching with a violence that marked each moment steeped in uncertainty and fear. It wasn't long before I reached an isolated part of the beach, where rocks jutted from the sand like ancient teeth gnashing against the oncoming tide. I sank onto the damp sand, my heart thrumming in my chest, savoring the false sense of solitude enveloping me. The encroaching fog danced around me, cloaking the world in an eerie silence, yet it also turned the sound of crashing waves into muffled whispers, an invitation, a demand. Then, the air shifted, growing cold enough to chill my bones. A soft laughter tickled the edges of my consciousness, echoing through the creeping haze. "We know you're here." The voice rolled over me, syrupy and malicious, igniting every instinct in my body to flee. But I couldn't move. Terrified, I turned around, the fog swirling behind me like a predatory animal drawn to its prey. A shadow materialized, coalescing from the murk, a figure flanked by the silhouettes of my friends, their faces devoid of every emotion I thought I recognized. Empty sockets, hollow shells speaking without sound, the anguish painted on their twisted visages spoke volumes. "Join us, it's so much easier to surrender," the flickering shadow of my friend Zoe spoke, her voice a blend of allure and despair. Each word dripped intoxicatingly sweet, weaving around me, urging me to let go, to succumb to that willfully enticing darkness, the very darkness I had fled. I shook my head, wrenching my gaze from their silent plea, but the laughter crescendoed, and the figures morphed, their bodies stretching unnaturally, limbs elongating as they moved toward me. Inch by inch, with malicious glee. "You are ours, always," the voice sang out, wrapping around me like a serpentine embrace, pulsing with the rhythm of the crashing surf. With a Herculean effort, I tore my gaze back to the ocean, feeling a new wave of terror wash over me, drowning out any shred of rational thought. From the depths, a creature emerged, teeming with dark intention, rising from the water with mirrored scales reflecting the moonlight, a depthless eye locked onto mine as it crested over the waves. It bore not just hunger, but an ancient malice that permeated the air. Then, the message on my phone blinked once more, "Come back," and beyond it loomed the shared shadows of my friends intertwined with the ghastly creature, grinning maliciously from the depths, enticing me to join their ranks. My heart raced as I realized the truth. The horizon had become a shimmering portal, a twisted invitation where time blurred and purpose shattered like glass, inviting me in with an irresistible call. And, without any say-so of my own, I felt the cold tendrils of the encroaching fog snag at my ankles, pulling me inexorably toward the abyss waiting on the shore. That I was spiraling, fighting against an unseen current deep within me, teetering on the precipice. I was left with but one agonizing choice. Would I fall into their waiting arms, or would I cast away my very existence, defying the void as the shadows stretched forth to welcome me back into their suffocating grasp? Just as I prepared to leap or expire, an echo screamed through the mist, pulling me between worlds. My finger poised at call on my phone, shivers danced along my spine as I locked eyes with that monstrous figure rising from the depths. The last thought I could grasp vanished as the shadows beckoned me further into their darkened embrace, and then there came the rippling sound of laughter, the air charged with an ominous energy, as one final message pulsed on my screen: "Don't you want to play?" The waves roared in approval, their frothy fingers curling around my ankles as if to offer salvation from the judgment of the shadows. I teetered at the edge, the mist swirling ominously about me, dark tendrils reaching further with each heartbeat. The laughter merged with the waves, creating an unnatural symphony, a ghostly melody that filled my mind with dread and confusion. "What do you want?" I choked out, my voice barely audible above the chaotic chorus. The figure from the ocean, now rising higher, stretched its sleek form as it moved closer, its eyes glinting with predatory intelligence. "Why, we want you, of course," it purred in a voice that sounded like wind through dry leaves, slithering through reality towards me. "You have been chosen to join us, to become part of the story." I fought back against the creeping sensations of inevitability that wrapped around me like a vice. With every second, I felt the weight of my decision press against my chest, an unbearable heaviness that spurred my instincts to flee. The laughter of my friends echoed in the background, their echoes weaving around me like a net, trying to draw me into their embrace, and yet, a flicker of defiance glimmered in the depths of my mind. I had not come this far to surrender to them. A decision made in panic would only lead to an outcome worse than the dread that clawed at my sanity. I turned once more to the ocean, the depths obscured by a murky haze that reflected not just waves but something far darker beneath the surface. That was when I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I jerked back, whirling around to face the shadowy figures of my friends, their expressions now twisted into grotesque mocks of recognition, pure malice bubbling beneath the surface. Their eyes gleamed with something otherworldly, an alien intelligence churning behind what had once been familiar faces. "You can't escape, we are always with you," they chorused, the harmony oddly phrased, singing as if losing their former selves. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest, and the voice of the creature echoed ever closer, drawing near, vibrating through my very being. Terror seized me as the world around me faded into shades of gray, pulling away surrealistically in a swirling cyclone of despair. I felt the texture of the universe shift beneath my feet, suddenly realizing that I was no longer just facing them, but the very fabric of reality itself. Then it happened. The fog thickened, spreading like liquid darkness around me, and I could see it. The shadows were not just feasting on the essence of my friends, they were pulling me in too, drawing on my fear and perhaps something much more, a hunger to consume. The message on my phone flickered wildly, "We know your secrets." I gasped, electrified. In that instant, I could feel the truth wash over me, the elusive memories of fragile moments spent in laughter, in life, suddenly overshadowed by the inky tendrils of despair unraveling them. I could hear the cries of those who had been taken, the resonance of their last moments echoing through time and space. "Help us," Zoe's voice echoed in a chilling harmony, but it was no longer a plea. It morphed into a command, a resonance that terrified me to my core. I felt their presence shift, melding into a singular force of will demanding my submission. "No," I gasped, my voice trembling against the overwhelming tide of sound. The monster from the ocean dipped its head beneath the water, a momentary retreat, laughing wickedly, its excitement palpable in the electric atmosphere. I took a step back, trying to shake off the binding sensations tethering me to the shadows, but just as I turned to break free from them, the shadows lunged forward. The surge pulled at my being, wrapping around my throat, choking back my scream and forcing me to look into their suffocating abyss. "Don't you understand?" they hissed, every syllable laden with horror as reality warped around us. "You will be one of us. Forever." The light around me dimmed, transforming into terrible shapes that slithered and twirled in the shadows. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and a crack split along the sand, a chasm opening up, giving birth to a yawning void that beckoned with a voice more alluring than reason. It seemed to whisper ancient secrets that held promises of power, of unfathomable revelations, and pressing fear that threatened to consume me whole. That I felt my spine tingle as I instinctively reached for my phone, desperate to escape the grasp of their malevolence. My fingers flew over the screen, sending a message, "Help." But just before I hit send, a deafening roar erupted from the ocean. The creature surged forth, crowning itself with brine and scales, eyes blazing with fury and intent. "Join us, and I will make you whole again," it beckoned, a seductive pull I could not ignore. The edges of my existence began to fracture as the boundaries blurred around me, the shadows closing in, the earth trembling as if it were an eve of reckoning, and then, just as the pulse of darkness threatened to snap my very essence, the shadows flickered with unfathomable speed, surging past the now gaping chasm behind me, leaving me teetering on the edge. The final message glinted ominously on my phone's screen, "Do you see now? You'll never be alone." And with a gasp that mirrored my spiraling dread, the world around me plunged into inky blackness as I felt myself falling into the abyss, unsure of what waited, uncertain if I'd emerge renewed or utterly destroyed. The line between my reality and the shadows blurred as my scream echoed into oblivion, swallowed whole in the dark. Then, a disembodied voice crackled through the shadows, a horrifying farewell, "Welcome to the family." The air was thick with malice as I plunged into darkness, the cold tendrils of despair wrapping around my limbs like a shroud. I fell through an endless void, my body weightless, thoughts scrambling in the dim recesses of my mind. The screams from the surface somewhere beyond the darkness faded into a haunting echo, leaving behind only the pulse of fear that throbbed in my ears. Suddenly, I landed with a jarring thud on an unyielding surface, the shock rattling me to my core. Gasping, I pushed myself up, only to find myself surrounded by a surreal, semi-translucent landscape that shimmered with eerie light. It was a place caught halfway between the living world and the dying one, an agonizing reflection of the reality I had known. Pale shadows flitted past me, their features distorted and agonizingly familiar. I squinted into the gloom, heart hammering wildly in my chest. My friends' faces contorted in expressions of terror drifted through the landscape, their bodies flickering like dying embers. Clad in sorrow, they swirled, becoming an ethereal dance of despair that filled the air with their eerie whispers. "We told you to stop," Zoe's voice howled, a distant echo that bore the weight of anguish. The shadows spun around her, melding with her form, and as she extended her hand towards me, I was struck by the sorrow in her eyes, a recognition of our shared past now tainted by dread, torn between the instinct to embrace her and the gnawing horror of her current existence. I stumbled backward. The ground beneath me felt unstable, shifting like the tides of the sea above. Around me, the shadows pulsed, feeding off the pain. "Join us," they crooned, tempting me with the promise of belonging, of a place beyond the burdens of the living. "No!" I screamed, the word tearing from my throat as I turned to run, but the air around me thickened. The shadows writhed, constricting and leaching the warmth from my skin, intent on claiming me as one of their own. As I sprinted, I felt their fingers brush against me, slick and clammy, weaving through my hair, tugging at my clothes, as if they wished to pull me into merging with their twisted reality. Desperate, I darted towards the only sliver of light in this spectral torment, a shimmering pathway that flickered like a mirage. With each step, deep-rooted memories clawed at my mind, laughter, joy, and a fleeting moment at the beach where the sun sunk low, stitching golden seams across the sky. But now, that memory morphed, growing sinister, seeped in darkness like ominous ink upon water. I reached the edge of the shimmering light, which felt almost electric against my skin. I looked back, and what I saw froze my blood. My friends had become shadows of despair, mere silhouettes twisted in agony with hollow eyes that bore into my soul. "You can't escape," they murmured in unison, hands outstretched with an ache to pull me back. The words were no longer a plea, but a manipulation of my deepest fears, an attempt to root me to their ghostly plane. In a surge of adrenaline, I shoved my way into the light. The ethereal glow enveloped me, securing me in a fragile embrace that tantalized with the possibility of salvation, yet tinged with impending doom. But the shadows were relentless. I could feel them clawing at the edges of my essence, desperate to pull me back. Just as I thought I was breaking free, a scream erupted from the darkness, a sound that dug deep into my soul. It was a scream I recognized, a sound that belonged to one of my friends left behind, now blending with the voices of the shadows who thrived in this horrifying limbo. "Save us!" Their chorus wailed, resonating through me and flooding my mind with their once familiar faces now lost to the night. Heart racing, I dug into my pocket, desperate for my phone, the last tether to reality, my evanescent hope. Before my fingers brushed the cold metal, I saw flashes of pictures on the screen, images of happier times that morphed into nightmarish reflections, faces sinking into the waves of darkness as shadows grinned with sinister delight. Suddenly, the light flickered, an unsettling warning, and in the blink of an eye, it dimmed, transforming into a kaleidoscope of agony. The shadows danced in glee, an echoing laughter resonating harshly as if mocking my struggle. "No! I will not join you!" I shouted, a scream of defiance spiraling from my lips, but even as my words echoed, I felt my voice falter, consumed by the terrible weight of their incessant whispers. The shadows shuddered, and for a brief moment, I could see flickers of their true form, twisted wraiths writhing in anguish, waiting for the chance to drag me down. As the light faded further, I found myself face to face with one of them, a reflection of every memory I had cherished, mocking me with tenderness turned monstrous. "What are you?" I choked, choking on my fear, just as it lunged forward, reaching out with long, claw-like fingers. In that moment, I felt a spine-chilling realization coursing through me. It didn't just seek my demise. They wanted something from me. But what? Before I could comprehend any more, a pulse shot through the air, and a blinding roar erupted from the chasm beneath, the darkness rippling like boiling water. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and in the throaty hiss that followed, I understood, their hunger was insatiable, and I was no longer merely prey, but a vessel to sustain their existence. With desperation surging like electricity in my veins, I leapt toward the dying glow, heart pounding with the certainty that if I didn't escape now, the shadows would claim me as one of their own. As the light flickered, fighting against the monstrous tide, I grasped at it only to feel the cold fingers of the creature wrench at my heart, pulling apart the very fabric of who I was, and then darkness enveloped me again, swallowing every light, every hope, every memory, as the whisper echoed across my consciousness, chilling me to the bone, "You can't escape what you've become." Just as the shadows began to drown me in despair, I felt an intense pull, a desire to remember. With one desperate thought, I called out to the light, the fleeting memory of laughter and joy, a promise I would fight to uphold, but below me, I could hear the words growing louder, distorted, heart-wrenching, clutching at my sanity with iron fists, "Join us, join us, join us," and that was when I realized I was not lost in the abyss after all. The abyss had found me. The world pinched itself back into focus, a whirl of colors crystallizing around me. I stood on the shore of the beach again, water gently lapping at my feet, but the scene was irrevocably different. The sun hung low in the sky, smothered by impending darkness that crawled up from the horizon, tendrils of shadow snaking into the bright world that had once felt warm and inviting. The laughter I clung to began to echo faintly, but it was drenched in an eerie undertone, a painting of auditory chaos regarding the whispers that sought me in the dark. Staggering back, I turned sharply to look at the beach house looming nearby. Its paint was peeling, and the windows seemed to leer at me, black pits where friendly reflections once resided, and a chill prickled down my spine. I crossed my arms instinctively, hoping to ward off the cold that seeped into my very essence. With each breath, I was aware of the weight in my chest, the heaviness of dread the shadows had imparted to me. Heart pounding, I approached the house, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. Open doors beckoned me in, and while every instinct screamed to run, uncertainty clawed at my mind, an insatiable urge to find what was hidden inside. Shadows danced within the house's stark interior, flickering in the dim light like specters of the past. Each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoed, a reminder of forgotten memories swarming around me. The walls, once sun-kissed and bright, now wore a veneer of decay. Photographs littered the surfaces, faces in various stages of life frozen in time. There were moments of joy and laughter alongside those darkened by grief. As I approached one of the larger frames, a chill swept through the room, carrying the bitter scent of salt and decay. The reflected faces warped subtly as I drew closer, shadows twisting around them, their smiles morphing into grotesque grimaces. "Help us," a voice whispered from within the frame, a plea laden with anguish. I stumbled back, plastering my back against the wall, heart hammering in my chest as panic threatened to overwhelm me. I looked around, searching for the source, only to find a memory echoing. My friends were here once, their laughter filling the stark walls with warmth. But that warmth felt poisoned now, and a shiver danced down my spine. Suddenly, the sound of waves crashing brought me back to the present, a reminder of my reality now laced with shadows and unending torment. They were lurking close, a suffocating presence that raised the hairs on my arm and darkened the very essence of the space I stood in. As I stood there, fear twisted my gut, reminding me of the dark truth. The call from the shadows was growing louder. Determined to cleanse myself of this nightmare, I sprinted for the door leading to the backyard where the ominous ocean swelled. With each step, the atmosphere crackled with supernatural energy, pressing upon me like a weighted blanket. The echoes of my friends' laughter twisted in the air, turning into wails that reverberated within my mind, glimmers of their faces flickering like candles about to be snuffed out. Before I could reach the door, a paralyzing cold seized my legs, rooting me in place. Glancing down, I gasped as shadowy tendrils wrapped around my ankles, slick and unyielding, draining warmth from my body. Panic surged through my veins as I struggled to break free, but the grip was relentless. Glancing upwards, I saw the photograph's figures now standing directly in front of me, their bodies shifting and flowing like liquid darkness, eyes glowing with a sorrow that chilled me to the core. "Join us, join us, join us," they chanted, voices blurring into a harrowing symphony begging for connection. I could see Zoe among them, no longer a mere shadow but a blend of emotions, a pained echo of who she once was. The longing for release, mixed with the horror of their twisted existence, enveloped me, paralyzing my thoughts. "I can't," I cried, the words breaking as I wrestled against the shadows. With rage emanating from within, I recalled moments of light, the beach. Our laughter in the sun, and the flickering firelight as the sun set beyond the horizon. A visceral surge of energy welled up within me, and I made one final desperate attempt to wrench myself free. I screamed, a guttural sound that ripped itself from the depths of my despair, coursing through the air like a shockwave. In the next heartbeat, the shadows recoiled, releasing me with violent force. I tumbled backwards into the house, the air thick with darkness swirling violently around me. I gasped, scrambling to my feet as images of my friends melded together like ghosts trapped in a cyclone of desolation. "Please," I begged, unsure of who I addressed. "You don't have to be like this." But the shadows laughed, an echoing cacophony of mockery that spiraled around me. They were becoming stronger while I felt myself crumbling, the line between reality and nightmare blurring dangerously. I turned toward the door again, the faint gray light of the outside world peeking through, a siren's call, yet before I could take a step, a whisper slithered into my ear from the shadows. "You think you can escape, but we are part of you now." The words crashed over me like a tidal wave, choking the air from my lungs, every instinct whispering to run but my feet unresponsive, the entrapment tightening around my heart, and then, from the depths of the shadows, I saw it. A figure slowly emerging, cloaked in darkness, but still undeniably familiar, my face, twisted with sorrowful rage and disdain, lighting up like a specter. "It's time to choose," it hissed, stretching a hand toward me, coated with shadows that shimmered like broken glass. As its fingers touched mine, a shock reverberated through me, igniting flickers of memories clouded by dread. The darkness inched closer, feasting on my hesitation. I felt every ounce of my resolve shatter, the void promising escape laced with sweetness beyond measure as I was pulled into its embrace, and just as clarity began to break through the chaos, I heard their voices echo dangerously, merging as one: "Forget the past, let go of the light, join us, forever." In that terror-filled moment, I realized that the shadows didn't just want me, they wanted all of us. And just as the remnants of my essence began to fray under the shadows' pulls, a fleeting thought broke through: could I really abandon them? Before I could gather the courage to decide, the darkness surged forward, enveloping me entirely, and I felt myself slipping away as one horrifying truth gnawed at my mind: I wasn't merely standing at the edge of choice, I teetered at the precipice of oblivion. The shadows clung to me as I stood on the precipice, a gaping maw of darkness eagerly consuming the light that struggled to define my misery. I was enveloped, my very essence twisted and twirled into the winds of despair. My heart raced, knowing this was not just a realm of lost souls but something graver, a prison where past and present intertwined, corrupting every ounce of hope I had. Yet, in the boundless darkness, a sliver of defiance ignited a will to resist the call of surrender. As the shadows closed in, I thought of my friends, laughing on the beach one last time before everything spiraled into madness. Their names echoed in my mind, agitating the very shadows that devoured them. I could feel their anguish merging with mine. But these weren't just echoes. I needed to confront this evil lurking in the house and the dark tendrils coiling around my heart. Enough! I screamed into the abyss, my voice surging outward like a shockwave. I felt my breath quicken as the shadows recoiled, whispers morphing into terrifying shrieks. "You don't have the power over me." The shadows stuttered, coiling back as I took the final step back toward the threshold, pushing through the weight of memories. They seemed to writhe and dance in desperation. My friends' faces emerged from the darkness, twisting between expressions of anger and agony, their voices harmonizing into one chilling plea: "Release us." What if it was a trick? What if their suffering was feeding this darkness? Fury ignited in my chest. They needed my strength to escape, to break the cycle of despair. I reached out, summoning fragments of strength buried deep within, and concentrated, envisioning the light that once filled our days together, using it to sever the ties binding us in anguish. I choose the light. I choose life. The shadows screamed, a dissonant sound that ripped through my consciousness, resonating like a thunderclap. Everything around me shimmered and twisted, colors bleeding into one another as the entity holding my friends began to shatter, fragments of darkness cascading into a void. Suddenly, I was falling. Not into despair, but through layers of existence, a spiral of memories flashing through my mind. Moments of laughter, shared stories round a campfire, the unbreakable bonds we formed, until I tumbled into a depthless chasm, each heartbeat echoing louder, drowning out the screams of the shadows. Then, silence enveloped me, and when I finally opened my eyes, I lay on the beach. The sun's warmth bathed my skin. Each grain of sand felt real, grounding me in the present. I pulled myself up, gasping for breath, and the remnants of panic fled as waves lapped gently at my feet. I was alive, but as I turned to face the house, it loomed like an ancient specter, inviting me to step back in, but then I heard it a soft whisper, chilling in its familiarity. Did you really think you could sever our bond? Heart racing anew, I flipped to see the apparitions of my friends line the edge of the water, their faces devoid of life, eyes reflecting the sorrow of 1,000 forgotten memories. They looked at me with longing mixed with betrayal, a silent accusation lingering within their gaze. What did you mean? I stammered, taking a step back. I could feel something clawing at my chest, an uncertainty that tightened around my heart like a vice. Free us, Zoe's voice echoed, but beneath it lay a taunting cadence that echoed back at me. You can't escape what you've become. The darkness inside you won't let you go. No, it's not true. I protested, panic rising. Fated to return to the depths of their embrace, I looked to the ocean, searching desperately for allies in my flight. But the waves now felt hollow, indifferent. They were no longer my saving grace. What do you want from me? I screamed, feeling small and helpless under the weight of their twisted redemption. Join us, they replied in unison, shadows creeping ever closer, an endless pull. The house in the background beckoned with its dark secrets, laughter mingling with cries in an ephemeral symphony. I stumbled back, panic clawing at my thoughts. You're no longer them. I cried, but the shadows only laughed, their expressions shifting in the twilight. You are like us now. You cannot escape. In that moment of horror, realization gripped my soul. I hadn't severed any bond. The evil had seeped within me during my descent. I was forever altered. The final whispers latched onto my consciousness, curling around my mind like a dark fog. You don't leave us, we are inside you now. As I staggered back, terror flaring in my chest, I thought of the laughter, of love unbound, only to realize their shadows had claimed a piece of my heart, a tether that would never fade. They were right, all that had transpired was merely the beginning, and then the chilling truth washed over me. While I was alive in body, the darkness would forever echo in my soul. Because in the end, I understood this wasn't just about escaping a cursed house. This was about facing the darkness within, a darkness that never truly leaves once it has tasted the light. As the shadows crept closer, my friends grinning grotesquely beneath the moonlight, their melody intertwined with my heartbeat, I could hear the distant echo of laughter, familiar and yet terrifying. Who will you answer now? They sang, as a new tide of silence enveloped me. And beneath the weight of their sorrowful gazes, I whispered to the night, I'm afraid I already know.